Welcome back to TCM's Den of Iniquity, otherwise known as Noir Alley. I'm Eddie Muller, your noir mixologist, coming to you from Bar 355 in Oakland, California. Now, according to the publicity department at Columbia Pictures, the movie you are about to see, 711 Ocean Drive, dared to reveal so much of the inner workings of organized crime, it actually had to be filmed under police protection. This press book is filled with one story after another about how the studio valiantly made this groundbreaking film despite constant threats of sabotage and violence. Much is made in those pages of how Columbia Pictures took out insurance policies with Lloyd's of London to protect against the kidnapping of stars Edmund O'Brien and Joanne Drew. I quote, "It can now be revealed that key Los Angeles police officers instituting security measures that recalled the top-secret activities of the government in wartime guarded the filming of 711 Ocean Drive against repeated threats of violence." I detect just a smidge of overheated PR hype, but we'll get to the truth of the matter in a moment. First, let me provide some context. 711 Ocean Drive was one of the first movies that Columbia made, and definitely its best, in what was during the 1950s a subgenre of noir, the exposé picture. Congressional hearings on organized crime had captured the public's imagination, especially once these sessions started being broadcast on television. Hollywood sensed a public craving for dramatic reenactments of the events that were being revealed, albeit vaguely and undramatically, in congressional chambers. A pair of opportunistic writers, Richard English and Francis Swan, who'd made no significant mark in Hollywood to this point, had the savvy to cozy up to LAPD Lieutenant William Burns. He was one of the leaders of the department's legendary Gangster Squad, a group of cops given carte blanche to keep organized crime outside LA. The renegade exploits of these lawmen could not be properly depicted until decades later in such violent cops and robbers sagas as Mulholland Falls, LA Confidential, and Gangster Squad. Back in 1950, when the squad was in action, it was a pretty big deal for Burns to give writers inside dope about the inner workings of interstate gambling rackets. But instead of turning it into a story about crusading cops, English and Swan instead told a tale about how an ordinary guy, in this case an electronics whiz played by Edmund O'Brien, rises through the rackets to become Mr. Big, running an illegal West Coast gambling empire. You just know this guy's fall will be spectacular. Years ago, Joseph Newman appeared at one of my noir festivals for a screening of 711 Ocean Drive. He was very proud of the film, which was the biggest production he had directed up to that time. He confirmed that there were indeed obstacles during the production, especially when the company decided to shoot in Las Vegas. Vegas, of course, was built by gangsters with gambling money, and a film threatening to expose how the mob built the suckers was, as you might imagine, unwelcome. So the Vegas scenes were switched to Palm Springs. When it got out that the producers intended to stage the film's climax at Boulder Dam, 35 miles south of Sin City, discouraging phone calls were placed to producer Frank Seltzer and studio boss Harry Cohn. Rather than being scared, the producer and the studio boss turned the situation to their advantage, making it seem as if production of 711 Ocean Drive was only slightly less challenging than landing troops at Normandy. Considering that gambling today is a multi-billion-dollar legal racket, all this fuss might seem like much ado about nothing. But one thing it amounts to is a terrifically entertaining movie, one that gives Edmund O'Brien a rare chance to play the lead. And just try keeping track of his spiffy threads. He has got enough wardrobe changes in this film to make Claire Trevor envious. Okay, let's get it in gear. We are headed to 711 Ocean Drive. When this film was made, there clearly was a virus going around, one that caused a fever for climactic chases through big man-made mazes. I'm thinking of The Sewers and He Walked by Night and The Third Man, both of which predated, just barely, the big climax of this picture. Director of photography Franz Planer did a terrific job, not just with scenes inside the dam, but the entire film. He was often credited as Frank Planer, hiding, for some reason, his Eastern European roots. He was born in what's now known as the Czech Republic, did most of his early film work in Austria, and came to Hollywood in 1937 to embark on a career that would see him nominated 5 times for the Best Cinematography Oscar. He's got a number of evocative film noirs to his credit, including The Face Behind the Mask, The Chase, 99 River Street, and one of noir's genuine masterpieces, Crisscross. This was one of the rare times Joanne Dru appeared in a crime film, unless you count the noir-stained All the King's Men, which she'd made the previous year. On that film, she was reunited with actor John Ireland, whom she'd met making the classic Red River in 1948. She left her husband, singer Dick Haymes, to marry Ireland. Frankly, it's odd seeing her in a modern dress crime film when you're used to seeing her on horseback or tending the hearth in westerns like She Wore a Yellow Ribbon, Wagon Master, and Vengeance Valley. I'm also giving a shout out to supporting player Robert Osterloh, who has a pretty substantial role by his standards as Gitzy, the hitman Mal Granger rubs out in classic noir fashion. Once director Rudolf Maté gave Osterloh his first bit role in the 1948 picture The Dark Past, the actor quickly became a noir fixture, with memorable bits in The Undercover Man, Gun Crazy, White Heat, Crisscross, The Prowler, and many more. More often than not, he was the guy on the losing end of a tense standoff. Hey, there had to be somebody on call when Elijah Cook was already booked. As for director Joe Newman, he enjoyed a long career, getting his start as assistant director to such legends as Ernst Lubitsch and George Cukor, before assuming the director's chair himself after serving in World War II. He made a couple of other solid noirs, Abandoned in 1949 and The Human Jungle in 1954. But he's probably best known as the director of the campy sci-fi favorite This Island Earth. Feature films ended for Joe in the 1960s, but he easily made the transition to the small screen, directing episodes of The Twilight Zone and The Alfred Hitchcock Hour. If Newman wasn't a forceful stylist, it could have something to do with his personality. I found him to be a mild, low-key, very humble guy, a craftsman who was more than competent, but perhaps a little too grateful just to have a steady job in Hollywood. Now, as for what's coming up next week, I'm showing another foreign language noir from one of the greatest directors of all time. Response was so positive to my Noir Alley airing of Akira Kurosawa's High and Low, I've decided to show his first film noir, 1948's Drunken Angel, starring Toshiro Mifune and Takashi Shimura. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to have a drink and call my bookie. Until next time, see you in the shadows.
Next on TCM, I Confess, then The Wrong Man, and later, The Big Shot. TCM is living large tonight.